the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, the infected blood scandal reflects a profound failure across almost every part of the British state. On Monday in our apologies and yesterday on the question of compensation, this House was united. But too many times we've heard similar sentiments from that dispatch box and from this one. There are many hard yards to go. So does the Prime Minister agree with me that we will only now make real progress if we finally tackle the lack of openness, transparency and candour that Sir Brian Langstaff identified as having prolonged the victims' suffering for decades?
Minister. Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The infected blood scandal is shocking, truly shocking, but it's not unique. The story is familiar. Concerns raised but ignored, reports written but not acted on, victims and their families campaigning for years just to be heard. So I want to focus in, if I may, on the duty of candour, or lack of it, which has been a failing in scandal after scandal, injustice after injustice, from Grenfell to Horizon, Hillsborough, and now infected blood. And I've read the government has called for evidence about the duty of candour in health, but I can't think of a single example where that duty of candour should not apply to all public servants across the board. And I don't think it's possible for any of us to stand at these dispatch boxes and honestly say, never again, unless we address it. So does the Prime Minister agree that the time has now come for the duty of candour to be clearly enshrined in law across the board? Thank you. I understand the Prime Minister wants to look at the recommendations in detail and to come back to them in due course, but we can't look away on this duty of candour. So can I at least ask the Prime Minister to expand the call for evidence on the duty of candour beyond health? We do owe that to the victims of Hillsborough and Horizon, and to work across the House to establish a far-reaching and binding duty of candour just as quickly as possible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In his report, Sir Brian identified individual failures, a number of them, even cover-ups. But alongside that, he also found equally important and harder to reach institutional and cultural failings, including in the NHS. A defensive attitude which refused to acknowledge problems, the silencing of those who raised concerns, and a total failure of leadership when faced with the truth. Now, the NHS does a remarkable job every day, but that is indefensible. Does the Prime Minister agree that the very culture of the NHS needs to change?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
We need reform, we need change, and I've seen firsthand how important reform is during my time running the Crown Prosecution Service. But I also saw how hard it is, particularly on cultural issues. It requires brave decisions and difficult decisions. Now, 11 years ago, the Health Secretary, as Health Secretary, the now Chancellor said, the era of gagging NHS staff from raising their worries about patient care must come to an end. But 11 years on and 10 months on from the Lucy Letby case, there are still clear examples of NHS managers still gagging staff and then being moved on instead of being moved out. So will the Prime Minister now commit to ensuring that those who do gag and silence whistleblowers will no longer be able to work in the NHS? Sir Brian's report is a victory for all those campaigners and victims who fought so hard for this moment, including the Right Honourable Member for Hull North. But it's also one of profound pain, anger and sadness for so many. Now, there is a chance for us to make real progress on this issue, and we must do that with victims in mind. Now, given the degree of cross-party consensus that we've already seen on apologies and compensation, and given the government's promise to ensure compensation by the end of the year, will he also now promise to deliver on all the recommendations in the same timeframe by the end of the year?
Prime Minister. Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, speculation is rife, so I think the public deserve a clear answer to a simple question. Does the Prime Minister intend to call a summer general election, or is he feared?
Aye.
Mr. Speaker, as I have said repeatedly to him, there is, Mr. Speaker, spoiler alert, there is going to be a general election in the second half of this year, and at that moment the British people will in fact see the truth about the honourable gentleman opposite me, because that will be the choice at the next election, Mr. Speaker. A party that is not able to say to the country what they would do, a party that would put at risk our hard-earned economic stability, or the Conservatives that are delivering a secure future for our United Kingdom.
Mr. Speaker, he continues to play games with the public, but whilst he does that, let's get back to some serious matters. Because I was taken aback this week when a former Prime Minister spoke some sense. Alas, it was indeed David Cameron, because what he said was that in relation to graduate route visas, if any restrictions are implemented, it will lead to job losses, it will lead to university closures, it will lead to a reduction in research. And University Scotland outlines £5 billion of economic value at risk. So can I ask the Prime Minister, does he agree with the Foreign Secretary?
Yeah. The Foreign Secretary also said that the levels of legal migration to this country are too high, Mr. Speaker, and that's what I believe also, which is why it is right that we are taking decisive action to bring the numbers down. And, Mr. Speaker, that plan is working. In the first 3 months of this year, the visas issued are down by 25%, Mr. Speaker. Migration is on its way to being returned to more sustainable levels, and I appreciate that is a point of difference between the Honourable Gentleman's Party and indeed the Labour Party and us. We believe that level of migration needs to come down to more sustainable levels, so we ease the pressure on public services, and everyone who comes to our country must indeed contribute economically. That's the migration system we will deliver.
Click here to venture down the rabbit hole if you dare.